The hospital room was too white. That is the first thing that sticks in my mind when I look back. Not the physical pain, not even the initial terror, but that clinical, blinding, heartless whiteness. It felt like the walls were actively trying to scrub the grief right out of my skin, bleaching my memories until everything felt sterile and hollow. I was 24 years old, an age when you're supposed to be standing on the threshold of a bright future. But instead, I was strapped to a bed, waiting for our daughter to be born into a world that had just become an empty, echoing hallway. 3 floors below me, in a cold metal drawer, lay Mark, the man who was supposed to be holding my hand. Mark and I had spent months preparing for this day. We had practiced the breathing techniques until we collapsed into fits of giggles on our second-hand rug. We had the hospital bag packed by the front door for 3 weeks, sitting there like a silent promise of the life we were building. We used to joke about how he'd probably be the one to faint the moment the nurse walked in, and I'd have to be the strong one, coaching him through the delivery while I was the one in labor. But the universe has a cruel sense of humor. A distracted driver on a rain-slicked highway had made sure Mark would never see his daughter's face. And as the first real wave of labor pain ripped through my abdomen, I realized with a heart-stopping, visceral clarity that I was truly terrifyingly alone. I reached for my phone on the nightstand, my fingers shaking so violently I nearly sent the plastic water pitcher crashing to the floor. I called my mother. I knew exactly where she was, the autumn gala. It was the crowning jewel of the social calendar for the elite circles my parents worshipped with a religious fervor. I heard the music before I even heard her voice. The distant, crystalline clinking of champagne flutes, the low, practiced hum of wealthy, self-important laughter, and the swelling crescendo of a live violin section. When she finally answered, her voice wasn't warm or concerned. It was sharp, brittle, and deeply annoyed that I was interrupting her carefully curated evening. I told her the contractions were 5 minutes apart. I told her I was scared. I told her the doctors said it was time. I told her I couldn't do this alone without Mark. Elena, honestly, she had sighed, and I could almost see her in my mind, rolling her eyes toward the gilded ceiling and adjusting a diamond earring in a ballroom mirror. The doctor said you had days left. You're likely just worked up because of the funeral arrangements. It's stress, dear. Take a breath, call a taxi if it truly persists, but do not make a scene. Your father is in the middle of a vital merger talk with the Lloyds. We cannot simply walk out of the most important event of the season because you're feeling anxious. Just be a big girl, Elena. We will check on you in the morning. The line went dead. That flat, mechanical dial tone was the loudest sound I had ever heard in my life. It was the sound of a bridge collapsing. It was the sound of my childhood ending. It was the moment I realized that to my parents, I wasn't a daughter. I was a liability, a messy, inconvenient complication in their polished plastic life. I dropped the phone and screamed, but not because of the physical pain. I screamed because the people who brought me into this world didn't think I was worth leaving a party for. I spent the next 14 hours in a blur of agony and ghosts. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Mark. I saw the way his eyes crinkled when he laughed, the way he used to tuck a loose strand of hair behind my ear when I was stressed about my finals. I felt the phantom weight of his hand on my stomach, a hand that would never hold our child. The nurses were kind, but they weren't family. They looked at me with that devastating, heavy pity, the poor widow look. I hated it. I hated them for seeing me at my weakest. I hated the world for continuing to spin when my axis had been snapped in half. I labored in the dark, clutching the side rails of the hospital bed until my knuckles turned white, whispering Mark's name into the sweat-soaked pillow so the staff wouldn't hear me breaking apart. When Lily was finally born, she didn't cry at first. For a heartbeat, the world stopped again, and I thought the universe was going to take her too, just to finish me off. And then a tiny, defiant, beautiful wail filled the room. It was the most angry, wonderful sound I had ever heard. In that moment, something inside me shifted. The grief didn't leave, but it hardened. It turned from a liquid that was drowning me into a solid, cold stone at the center of my chest. I looked at my daughter's tiny, perfect fingers and I made a vow. I whispered it into her soft hair while the monitors beeped a rhythmic, lonely tune in the background. I told her that she would never need them. I told her that we would build a kingdom where those who abandoned us would never be allowed to set foot. The years that followed were not a movie montage. There was no upbeat music playing while I climbed the ladder of success. It was the smell of burnt, cheap coffee at 4 a.m., while I studied advanced coding languages and logistics algorithms with a sleeping toddler strapped to my chest in a second-hand carrier I'd bought for $5 at a yard sale. It was the soul-crushing humiliation of having my credit card declined at the grocery store while buying generic formula. Feeling the impatient eyes of the people behind me in line. It was the 3 hours of sleep I got between my shift at the local library and my freelance data entry jobs. I was a ghost haunting my own life, driven by a singular burning purpose. Every time I wanted to give up, I remembered that dial tone. My parents sent a check once about 6 months after the birth. It was for $500. It didn't come with a card, a gift for the baby, or even a simple, "How are you?" It came in a plain business envelope with a note from my father's secretary. Not even his own handwriting. The memo simply said, "For expenses." I didn't tear it up. I didn't have the luxury of pride yet. Lily needed shoes. I cashed it, bought her the best winter coat I could find, and I saved the receipt. I tucked that faded thermal paper slip into the back of my journal. It was my first piece of evidence. A reminder of exactly what my soul and my child's life were worth to them. $500 and a secretary's typed note. By the time Lily was 4, I had stopped sleeping almost entirely. I had discovered a massive systemic flaw in the way global logistics companies tracked international shipments. A gap in the encryption and data flow that was costing firms millions in lost cargo and administrative errors. I spent my nights building a patch, a software solution that was so elegant and so simple it felt like it had always existed, just waiting for me to find it. I lived in a one-bedroom apartment where the heater rattled like a dying animal and the walls were thin enough to hear the neighbors' every argument. But on my laptop screen, I was building a fortress of code that no one could tear down. I called my company Astraeus, named after the titan of the stars and the father of the 4 winds. I was going to be the storm they never saw coming. When I sold my first sequence of software, I didn't buy a car. I didn't buy jewelry. I moved us to a quiet, sun-drenched house with a garden for Lily to run in, and I put every other cent back into the market. I began to watch my parents' firm, Sterling and Associates. I watched it not with love or nostalgia, but with the cold, detached eye of a predator. I knew their books better than they did. I knew they were over-leveraged, desperately trying to maintain a lifestyle of galas and country clubs they could no longer afford. I knew they were still chasing the prestige of the old world while the new world, my world, was leaving them in the dust. They were dinosaurs who didn't know the meteor had already hit the atmosphere. The day finally came when the market shifted, just as my algorithms predicted it would. A global supply chain crisis hit, and Sterling and Associates found themselves holding the bag on tens of millions of dollars of unfulfilled contracts. They were desperate. They needed a massive bailout, an infusion of capital from a private equity firm that wouldn't ask too many questions or look too closely at their failing ethics. They reached out to Astraeus Holdings. They had no idea who owned it. I had spent 3 years hiding behind layers of shell companies, legal proxies, and ironclad non-disclosure agreements. I wanted to see their faces when the mask came off. I wanted the lighting to be perfect. I wanted them to feel the weight of every second I spent alone in that hospital bed. The meeting was set for a rainy Thursday. I chose a boardroom in the heart of the city, overlooking the very gala hall where my mother had told me not to make a scene 5 years prior. I dressed with surgical precision. A charcoal suit that cost more than my parents' first house. My hair pulled back so tight it felt like a helmet. I sat in that high-backed leather chair, my back to the door, watching the gray clouds move over the skyline. I felt Mark with me in that room. Not as a ghost of sadness, but as a silent witness to justice. I heard them enter. My father's voice was exactly the same, booming, arrogant, filled with the unearned confidence of a man who had never been told no by anyone who mattered to him. My mother was trailing behind him, her heels clicking rhythmically on the marble floor. I could smell her perfume, something expensive and floral that used to make me feel small and insignificant. Now it just smelled like the past. "We appreciate Astraeus seeing us on such short notice," my father said to my assistant, his voice echoing off the glass walls. "We are looking for a strategic partnership to bridge this temporary liquidity gap. We've been a pillar of this community for 30 years. And we intend to stay that way." Temporary liquidity gap. That is what he called the total collapse of his life's work. He still couldn't admit he was failing. He still couldn't admit he was weak. "The CO will see you now," my assistant said softly, stepping out and closing the heavy oak doors. I waited 5 seconds. I wanted the silence to stretch until it was heavy and uncomfortable. I wanted them to feel a fraction of the uncertainty I felt when the doctors told me Mark wouldn't be coming home. Then slowly, I turned the chair around. My mother dropped her leather clutch. It hit the floor with a dull thud that seemed to vibrate through the entire room. My father's mouth opened, but no sound came out. He looked at me, then at the nameplate on the desk that simply said Evance, then back at me. He was looking for the girl he had ignored. He was looking for the messy complication he had cast aside. But that girl was gone. I had buried her in the same ground as Mark. Elena, my mother whispered. Her voice was trembling, stripped of all its gala poise. What? What is this? What are you doing here? I am the person who decides if you have a home tomorrow, I said. My voice was flat. No anger. No shouting. Just the cold, hard weight of a fact. I have reviewed your proposal. It is weak. It is built on outdated projections and sheer ego. You are asking for $30 million to save a business model that died 10 years ago. Why should I invest a single penny in you? Now see here. My father started, his face turning that familiar, ugly shade of indignant purple. You are our daughter. Whatever happened in the past. We are family. This is your legacy too. You can't just let the family name be dragged through the mud. Think of the position this puts us in. Family. I leaned forward, the sunlight catching the edge of my desk like a blade. Family is a word people use when they want something they haven't earned. On the night Mark died, I called you 7 times. I was in labor, alone and terrified. You told me not to make a scene. You told me the Lloyds were more important than your granddaughter. You didn't even know her name until today, did you? You sent me a check for $500 via a secretary. Did you think that bought your way back into my life? I pulled a small faded piece of paper from my top drawer. The grocery store receipt for Lily's first winter coat. This cost $42, I said, sliding it across the mahogany table toward them. That is the only legacy you gave me. The rest? I built it while you were at galas. I built it while you were sleeping. I built it because you gave me no choice but to be stronger than you. I am not your daughter today. I am your creditor. My mother started to cry. It was a beautiful performance, one she had likely practiced for years. We were wrong, Elena. We were under so much pressure back then. We didn't realize how much you were hurting. We want to be in Lily's life now. We want to make it up to you. We can be a family again. You want $30 million, I corrected her, my voice cutting through her sobs like a razor. And you are willing to use a child you have never met as collateral to get it. That isn't love. That's a transaction. And unfortunately for you, I am very good at business. I stood up. The meeting was over. I felt a strange, soaring sense of lightness, as if the stone in my chest had finally evaporated, leaving behind something clean and sharp. I am not going to give you the money, I said, watching the blood drain from my father's face. But I am not going to let the firm go bankrupt today. Astraeus will acquire Sterling and Associates for its liquidation value. You will be stripped of your voting rights. You will be retired effectively immediately. I will provide you with a monthly stipend. Exactly $500. It is what you thought was enough for a mother and a newborn. I am sure 2 grown adults can make it work in a smaller apartment. The look on my father's face wasn't just anger anymore. It was a realization. He realized that the world he thought he controlled had been rewritten by the person he had thrown away. He realized that power isn't given. It's taken. As they were ushered out by security, my mother turned back one last time, her face a mask of shock. You've become so cold, Elena, she sobbed. I didn't blink. I just looked at the empty boardroom. I didn't become cold, I thought. I just stopped burning myself to keep you warm. That evening I went home. Lily was in the garden, chasing a butterfly near the roses we had planted together. She looked so much like Mark. It hurt, but it was a good kind of hurt now, a reminder of why I fought. I sat on the porch and watched her, the late afternoon sun warming my face. I didn't feel the need to celebrate. I didn't feel the need to gloat. True revenge isn't a loud explosion or a dramatic confrontation in the rain. True revenge is living a life so full, so successful, and so independent that the people who hurt you become nothing more than a footnote in a much better story. They thought they left me in the dark. They didn't realize that some things only grow in the dark. And now the sun was finally up, and for the first time in 5 years I could finally breathe.